Welcome to The Explainer, where we break down big ideas. Today, we are tackling a phrase you hear everywhere, from commercials to boardrooms, but one that's almost always used completely wrong: paradigm shift. You've heard it, right? Some company comes out with a new phone or a new car, or even a new laundry detergent, and they call it a paradigm shift. It's just become this go-to buzzword to make any little change sound absolutely revolutionary. We use it for fashion, for new diets, for basically any change at all. And in the process, we've kind of watered this incredibly powerful idea down to mean nothing more than just, a new way of doing things. So to get what it really means, we've got to go back to the source. Because the real story, well, it isn't about new gadgets or trends. It's about how our entire understanding of reality itself can be turned upside down. Our story starts back in the 1940s with a guy named Thomas Kuhn. He was a young, brilliant theoretical physicist at Harvard. And he was given this one assignment that would completely change his life, and honestly, our whole understanding of how science works. So to get ready for this class, Kuhn does what any good academic would do. He goes way back to the beginning, to one of the absolute giants of Western thought, Aristotle. He figured he'd find the origins of modern science. Instead, he just found this massive, super frustrating problem. And this right here, this was the contradiction that just completely baffled him. I mean, on the one hand, you have Aristotle the genius, the man who literally invented the logic we still use today, a master political scientist. But then Kuhn reads Aristotle's physics, and it just sounds, it sounds laughably wrong. Like rocks fall because they miss the earth wrong. How could the same person be so brilliant and at the same time a complete fool? Kuhn wrestled with this puzzle for days. And then, bam, it hit him. A true aha moment. Aristotle wasn't an idiot. He wasn't just making dumb mistakes. He was operating inside a completely different framework, a whole different set of rules about how the world works. His reality just wasn't our reality. So Kuhn needed a word for this all-encompassing framework, and he called it a paradigm. And a paradigm isn't just a single idea. No, it's the entire worldview. It's the set of glasses that scientists in a certain era wear, and it determines what questions they think are even worth asking and what counts as a real answer. And this discovery led Kuhn to challenge the most basic idea we all have about science, this idea that it's just this slow, steady march toward the truth. See, we usually think of science like we're remodeling a house, right? We find a leaky pipe, we fix it, we add a new room here, patch a hole there, but the foundation of the house stays the same. Kuhn came along and said, nope. That's not how it works at all. He said real scientific progress happens in violent revolutions. We don't just remodel the house, we tear the whole thing down and build a brand new one from scratch. And he laid out this whole process in a cycle. It starts with what he called normal science. That's when everybody agrees on the paradigm and they just spend their time solving little puzzles that fit inside it. But then anomalies start to pop up, results that just don't make sense. And when enough of these anomalies pile up, it creates a crisis. The old paradigm starts to crumble, leading to a revolution. A new paradigm comes along, there's this huge fight, and eventually a new normal is established. And then the whole cycle just starts over again. Okay, now this is where the idea gets really, really weird and cool. Kuhn argued that a paradigm shift doesn't just change how you think about the world, it actually changes what you're capable of seeing. And to get this, just look at the image on the screen right now. What's the first thing you see? Some of you probably saw a duck right away. Others saw a rabbit. And now you can probably flip back and forth between them. But here's the thing. You can't see both at the exact same time. The data, the black lines on the white background, is identical for everybody. But your perception, your reality, can literally switch in an instant. And that right there is the perfect way to understand Kuhn's point. Scientists working in different paradigms are like people looking at this drawing. They're all looking at the exact same world, the same data, but because of their different frameworks, they're literally seeing different things. And this isn't just some abstract idea. This is a historical fact. Check this out. In the year 1054, a star in our galaxy exploded in this massive supernova. It was so bright, you could see it during the daytime for weeks. Now, Chinese astronomers, whose paradigm said the heavens were dynamic and could change, they carefully recorded this new guest star. But in Europe, where the astronomers were stuck in Aristotle's paradigm of perfect, unchanging heavens, there is not a single record of this massive cosmic event. They looked at the same sky, but their paradigm made them blind to what was right in front of their faces. So when you really get down to it, a true paradigm shift is so much more than a marketing slogan. It's a fundamental change in the actual glasses through which we see reality itself. Kuhn's big idea is this incredible, humbling reminder that everything we understand about the world right now, all the science that feels so solid and objective, is really just our current paradigm. It's the house we're living in today, but it might not be the house we're living in tomorrow. And that leaves us with this one final, kind of provocative question. Just like those European astronomers who literally could not see an exploding star, what anomalies are we ignoring today? What guest stars are appearing in our sky right now that our current paradigms just don't allow us to see? That's definitely something to think about. You know, we have this picture of science, right? This noble, straight and narrow quest for the truth. But what if I told you that the way science actually moves forward is, well, a lot more chaotic, a lot more human, and way more revolutionary than you've ever been told? The story we usually get is pretty straightforward. It's this cumulative process. One generation of scientists lays down a brick of knowledge, and the next one comes along, nods, and carefully places another brick right on top. It's supposed to be this slow, steady, logical construction of our understanding of everything. But what if, instead of just adding new bricks, progress in science sometimes requires a wrecking ball? What if, to actually move forward, science has to completely demolish its own foundations and start over from scratch? It's a radical idea, and it's at the very heart of one of the most important books of the 20th century. The guy who swung that wrecking ball was a philosopher of science named Thomas Kuhn, and his whole world-changing idea comes down to one single word: paradigm. Now, a paradigm isn't just a theory. Oh no, it's the entire worldview. It's the set of assumptions you don't even question. It's the rule book for how you do your work. It's the very lens through which scientists see reality itself. So here's where it gets really interesting. The old view saw science as just adding more knowledge, a nice, steady march forward. Kuhn's view, he says science lurches forward through these violent paradigm shifts. It's not about adding to what we know, it's about completely replacing the old worldview with a brand new one. We're not talking about a simple renovation here, we're talking about a total demolition and reconstruction. And if you look at history, it's just filled with these revolutions. For almost 2,000 years, the Aristotelian paradigm was it. The universe was made of 4 elements, period. Then Newton comes along and just completely replaces it with this new paradigm of universal laws and gravity, a perfect clockwork universe. But then Einstein shatters that, showing that space and time themselves aren't fixed. And just when you think it's safe, quantum mechanics shows up and says, you know what? At the most fundamental level, reality isn't a clock at all. It's a cosmic game of dice. Every single one of those steps wasn't an addition, it was a total demolition of what came before. And this quote from Kuhn really gets to the heart of it. A paradigm shift doesn't just change the scientific answers, it changes the questions scientists are even asking. It literally alters how they perceive the world. After one of these revolutions, scientists are, for all intents and purposes, living and working in a completely different reality. So this leads us to Kuhn's most radical, most controversial idea: incommensurability. Yeah, I know, it's a mouthful, but the concept is just mind-blowing. It basically means you can't logically prove that one paradigm is objectively better than the one it replaced using some kind of neutral, shared standard. And why not? Because the standard itself, what counts as a good explanation, or even what counts as a fact, changes along with the paradigm. Let me put it this way. Imagine you have 2 high jumpers. One is on Earth, the other is on the moon. Can you really say the one on the moon is a better jumper just because they jumped higher? Of course you can't. The fundamental rule of the game, gravity, is totally different for each of them. That's incommensurability. Newtonian physicists and Einsteinian physicists, they weren't just playing the same game with different strategies. They were playing by entirely different rule books. You can't use one to judge the other. Okay, so if Kuhn's model of these revolutionary shifts is how science works, it brings up a really fascinating historical question. What are the conditions that even allow for these revolutions to happen in the first place? So let's use this idea to look at a famous puzzle. Why did this kind of scientific revolution ignite in the West and not in a place like China, which for centuries was way more technologically advanced? Well, there are a bunch of really compelling theories out there. First, there's a mathematical one. While China was brilliant at practical algebra, some argue it didn't have the same kind of abstract geometry that allows for certain theoretical leaps. Then there's a philosophical view, a worldview that was more about harmonizing with nature rather than trying to dissect it and dominate it. You've also got institutional factors, maybe the lack of a widespread, repeatable experimental culture, or the fact that science was often run by state bureaucrats instead of being driven by a chaotic market of competing merchants who needed an edge. And this is the weird one, there's an argument about the role of peace. Think about it. While China was often a massive, unified, and relatively peaceful empire, Europe was this chaotic hornet's nest of constant competition and war. This created a relentless arms race. That pressure to build a better cannon, for instance, forced incredible advances in metallurgy and the precision crafting of cylinders. And what is the one piece of technology at the absolute heart of the Industrial Revolution? The steam engine, which depends entirely on, you guessed it, a precision-crafted cylinder. The very technology of war became the engine for a whole new scientific paradigm. So what does this all mean when you put it together? What does it tell us about what science actually is? Well, it forces us to see science not as some cold, robotic process, but as something that is deeply, fundamentally, and maybe even beautifully human. Here's the big takeaway from all this. Kuhn basically showed us that science is a social activity. It's shaped by communities and their shared beliefs. Progress is pushed forward by competition, by weird results that just refuse to fit the old models, and ultimately by these incredible, revolutionary acts of imagination, of learning to see the same old world in a completely new way. It isn't a steady march towards some fixed final truth. It's a messy, passionate human story about changing the way we see. And that leaves us with a fascinating and maybe a little bit of a scary question to think about. When you look around at our own world, at all the things we hold to be scientifically true, to be absolutely unquestionable, which of them are just part of our current paradigm? What unbreakable law of science today will our great-grandchildren look back on as just a curious, outdated belief from a world they can barely even imagine?